How's it going, everybody? Rybrad here today, and I am joined by Abby, and today we've got the first episode of the Expansion Bros podcast. Hope you guys are ready for it. We're going to be previewing the NHL draft. I'm very excited to get into this. Going to ask Abby some of his opinions, what he's thinking. You guys are going to hear my opinions, and I hope you guys like it. So, how you doing, Abby?
I'm doing pretty good. As you guys can see, I got my absolutely beautiful Demko mask. I'm so happy with it. Thank you to my cousin for getting this for me.
Stay safe, everybody. Wear a mask.
Pretty busy with meetings and stuff. Actually, this mask is very breathable.
Okay.
As you can tell, I've been wearing this for like the last 20, 30 minutes. We've been prepping for the podcast. Very comfortable, very breathable. Obviously, because Demko's on it, it's got to be good. Not an issue with me wearing this at all.
I would have thought if it's got Demko on it, would stop you from breathing because it just stops everything.
See, Demko's smart like that. It's Demko smart technology.
Okay.
Demko knows.
Are you excited for the draft tomorrow?
I am very, very excited for the draft. NHL 20 has made me very, very not knowledgeable isn't the right word, but very familiar with some of these names. You know, the Lucas Raymonds, the Cole Perfettis, the Alexander Holtz, the Stutzlas. You know, the ones you hoard draft picks for, and then you take and shell. But looking at these names, there's other names that you wouldn't see as much. You know, maybe because you wouldn't take because of their potential. Someone like a Marco Rossi, who has more value in a real NHL setting than in NHL 20, where the potentials and stuff are arbitrary.
And you mentioned hoarding draft picks. I think this will be a big night for the Ottawa Senators franchise. I really think that, you know, depending on which way they go with their picks, it could really bolster them because they got some pieces there. Brady Tkachuk, Thomas Chabot right now. Some pretty good guys to build around. But I feel like what do they have? 2 top 10 picks at least.
3 and 5, I believe.
3 and 5. Okay. Yeah. I honestly think that is going to be a huge night. So Senators fans are probably super excited. Didn't win the lottery, even though they had a 25% chance of getting first overall.
Yeah, pretty good chance. That's got to be gut busting for the Senators because usually the best chance you got is that I believe it's a 12.5% chance if you're the worst in the league. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not. I think they downed it to 12.5, but I think you're right. I think you're right. Anyway, that's not the important part. The San Jose Sharks. You know what? I'm kind of high on the San Jose Sharks this year. We'll do a preview podcast later in the fall here, but I think the San Jose Sharks are going to be back into playoff contention. I really do. I think that team just needed to get healthy and get right. Potential Dubnyk Jones 1-2, 1A, 1B. Is that enough? I don't know. We'll come back to find out another time at a later podcast. But Ottawa's picking 3rd, thanks to San Jose, and 5th with their own pick. The Rangers get the first pick. The Kings with number 2. Ottawa, as I mentioned, with 3. Red Wings at 4. Senators round out the top 5. Then you've got the Ducks at 6. Devils at 7. Sabres 8. Wild 9. Jets at 10. Predators 11. Panthers 12. 13 is the Hurricanes from the Leafs. 14 is the Oilers, 15 is the Leafs from the Penguins, 16 is the Canadiens, 17 is the Blackhawks, 18 is the Devils from the Yotes. You got 19 with the Flames. The Devils get another pick at 20 there from Tampa via Vancouver. That was the JT Miller trade, I'm pretty sure.
Thank you, Tampa.
21 is the Columbus Blue Jackets. 22 is the Rangers from the Hurricanes. 23 is the Philadelphia Flyers. 24 is the Capitals. 25 is the Avs. 26 is the Blues. 27 is the Ducks from Boston. 28 is the Senators from the Islanders. 29 is the Vegas Golden Knights. 30 is the Dallas Stars. And 31 is the San Jose Sharks, traded from the Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning. How about that for the Rangers? I just want to talk about that for 1 second. They lose in the playoffs. These stats counted as playoff stats, right? In the play-in round, those were technically playoff games. How about that? You lose a playoff round and get first overall because you lost that playoff round.
That's absolutely insane. I remember at the time I was just very, very happy that it wasn't. It could have been so much worse. It could have been the Oilers. It could have been the Leafs. It could have been the Wild, who I no longer liked because we actually played a series against them, which is kind of a common theme. You know, you play against some people and you see how dirty they are and you start disliking them. But yeah, I was actually quite happy to see the Rangers just so that certain teams would not get them.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if a team like Edmonton or Toronto or Pittsburgh had won, they would have been a lot more outrage than the Rangers. I don't think any of those teams were a good one. I think maybe Minnesota. People would have been fine with Minnesota winning the first overall pick.
Dirty players.
Come on. You guys can't. Let's be honest. It's better. It's probably the best alternative. Them or Nashville. I feel like a lot of people. It's hard to hate those teams unless you've obviously played in a playoff
Nashville wouldn't
series.
have been bad.
So
the Jets, I wouldn't have minded as well. I wouldn't have minded the Jets getting them.
So let's start talking some players, picks, prospects. What's going to happen at the Zoom podium? However the NHL is planning on doing this, not in person, obviously, because of the virus. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm pretty sure we both have number one. It's got to be Lafreniere. It would be
Laffy Taffy.
It would be an absolute just shock. It would be probably the biggest surprise of the night. I think it'd be hard to top that if he doesn't go first.
100% agree with you. Alex Lafreniere is an extremely skilled player, often compared to Crosby. Brings a lot of speed in his game, great playmaking ability, and he can score a little bit as well. He will be a joy to watch on the ice, hopefully next year, if circumstances allow for us to have an NHL season, which I think they will. Lafreniere is probably the most likely Calder Trophy winner, and at this point, even though it's very, very early, it would be his trophy to lose, and it would be up to the following rookies to try and match his level of hype.
I don't think anybody is gonna come close to matching him in season number one, especially going to a Rangers team where he's already going to be surrounded by talent. It's not like he's going to a team that was at the bottom all season. I mean, the Rangers made the play-in, so obviously he's it's one of those things like I'm gonna just call to the NFL real quick, but I mean Joe Burrow to the Bengals. What they were missing is a quarterback, well, and a defense, but we won't get into football. But basically, he had the pieces around him that made it's going to make the transition a lot easier than it could have been if they only had, a player like that. Like, look at the Sabres, for example. When they drafted Jack, it was pretty much just Jack and Sam, and then they had to build the rest. We kind of tried to kick it into hyperdrive there. Didn't work. Here we are, picking 8th, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. I think I saw somewhere, speaking of Lafreniere, that he's gotten picked first in like every single draft he's ever been in. Like the CHL draft, he was the best rookie that year. I forgot the graphic. I saw it earlier today. I should have saved it, but here it is. I got it. First overall pick in 2017 in the QMJHL. He was the number one rookie in 2018. He was the number one player in 2019. He was the number one player in the World Junior Championships in 2020. Also in 2020, he was the number one player in the CHL, and he's projected to go in 2020 number one overall. Dude's a beast.
Man's a winner.
And that bodes well for the New York Rangers. But how about the two teams behind him? Because since we agree so strongly that Lafreniere is the consensus number one, number 2 and 3 are not as clear. There's two guys. Everybody's talking about two guys there. I feel like if somebody doesn't go, one of these two guys doesn't go, I'm obviously talking Stützle and Byfield. If one of them doesn't go, it'll be a shock. But who do you have? Who's number 2? Who's going to Los Angeles?
The Los Angeles Kings, with the number 2 pick, will select from DEL Tim Stützle. Tim Stützle is, in my opinion, the more skilled of the two players. And from what I've heard, I believe LA has had more interest in him than Byfield. In fact, to the point where I remember this is a story a couple months ago. They almost totally looked over Byfield to talk to Stützle. I like his upside, and maybe it may just be me being high on Europeans, but I think his ability and playing with men over in Dell will give him the ability to have an easier transition to the NHL, and I think his upside is similar, if not better, to that of Quinton Byfield. See,
this is where we're going to disagree. This is like, I think, the first time we've disagreed. Oh my God. I don't agree. I think Byfield is got superstar potential, in my opinion. He's got the potential to be a superstar, where Stützle's got elite potential. So there's a slight difference between them. I'm not saying Stützle's going to be a bust or anything like that. I just think Quinton Byfield's got everything you would ever desire out of a number 1 center. I mean, he's got the size, speed, skill, strength, all of it. Would you like to see him use his physicality a bit more? Yeah, but he doesn't necessarily have to be Ryan Getzlaf to use his body to an advantage. Now, Stützle's a average-sized player who's incredibly talented. I just think that their talent, that the size of Byfield is so much better than the size of Stützle, and their talent is just close enough. And I think Byfield is a bona fide center. Like, you're going to play him at center. Like, he's going to play center. I feel like Stützle may get pushed to the wing. And that's why, personally, I would see Byfield go ahead of Stützle. because of his, center. There's a premium on centers in the NHL. If you got a center core, you just got to put pieces around him. I'm a Sabres fan, so I'm going to keep using this. But basically, you put somebody on Jack Eichel's wing, and they're going to score 25 goals a season, right? Doesn't matter who they are. If they're in the NHL, they're scoring 25 on Eichel's wing. I think getting that center that can do that for your wingers really would help a team like the Los Angeles Kings right now.
That's a fair take. I like that Stützle can play both the center and the wing because I believe that gives more options and more versatility. If a player is used to playing one position, then you can't really shift them around on a line. Or I know we've discussed the possibility of, for example, Buffalo trading for a Jake Virtanen or something. But if you have Reinhart who can only play right wing, then there's no possibility to shift him around maybe to Jack's left side or potentially move Reinhart down because then you're moving him down to the second line. What I think with Stützle is, while you're right, there is definitely a premium on centers, and that's something we should acknowledge, that Quinton Byfield is 100% a bona fide center. I think potentially having that utility, as well as, in my opinion, what will be the easier transition to the NHL, and what I believe is also a higher ceiling, will allow for Stützle to be the superior draft pick.
See, that's where I disagree. I think the ceiling is higher for Byfield. If you want to go for who might be the more productive player for the first 3 seasons of their career, I might agree that Stützle is that guy. But if I'm looking at like who's going to lead my team to a cup, I think it might be more so Byfield than Stützle. And another thing that you were saying, look at Draisaitl. He's kind of got that. He can play on the wing with McDavid, or he can center his own line, and we saw the Edmonton Oilers do that too with much success this year. So that versatility, I'll give you that much. But I mean, Stützle. Is the Dell? I was gonna use the North American ice thing. I'm gonna do my best Don Cherry impression, but does the Dell use different size ice? Do you know? Because if they'd use that international sized ice, him potentially being a winger, it's going to be a little different at first, which I think maybe Byfield will get to the NHL sooner because of that.
I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure about that myself.
You're not an avid Dell watcher?
No, I can't say I am. But that's a fair point to consider.
All right. Well, since now that we have our top 3 out of the way, outside of the top 3, what guy do you think can be, speaking of Leon Draisaitl, who can be this year's Draisaitl? Maybe a guy that, because, in that draft, there wasn't a generational talent, but that guy outside of those top 3 picks, that is going to be that all-star, that superstar, the perennial guy that people are talking about, 3-4 years down the road, that like, my team that had picks 4 through 12 or something like that should have taken this guy. Which guy is going to make teams regret passing on him?
I like to think of this as the Quinn Hughes pick. Detroit picking up Zadina like an absolute goof. I think my pick for this would have to be Yaroslav Askarov. Askarov has the potential to be a very Carey Price-like goalie. In 2019-20, in 18 games in the KHL's minor league affiliate, the VHL, he put up a 2.45 goals against and a .920 save percentage. I believe he was the best goaltender in the VHL that season. And while the VHL is not the same as the KHL, which is what I consider to be the second best league in the world, I think that he has the potential to grow into a very similar caliber goalie, an elite caliber goalie like Carey Price, and backstop a team to the playoffs. This year, actually, in the KHL, he's played 3 games, and he has a .974 save percentage. So while that's a very, very small sample size, you can tell he's playing well right now. And I think I don't know if he comes over right away in the first year and potentially backs up wherever he goes, but I think the sky is the limit for Askarov, and if he can meet his potential, he could definitely backstop a team to a cup.
I can see it. Do you have his age pulled up there? I don't know how old he is. Is he still in his teens?
He was born June 16th, 2002, so he's 18 years old right now. He's 6'4". So being a big goalie also definitely helps.
He checks all the boxes for me. I just think, goalies always take a while. You always see those later returns. Although recently we're starting to see goalies come in younger. Those high potential goalies, those Vazzies, those Matt Murray, who may have fallen off a bit. The Thatcher Demko's now, I know he's a little bit older than the guys I'm mentioning, and Carter Hart especially. Yes, Thatcher Demko. Those guys are starting to come in, and you're starting to see goalies contribute younger. I think that's the whole thing in the NHL. The players are just getting younger. They're contributing sooner. I don't think it's taking as long for players to be that NHL ready, that body type, the whole thing. I think players, even at 16, 17, are starting to become real pros for the most part. You've got those names here and there, those kids that still have some growing to do to really fully achieve their NHL potential. I mean, hell, Jack Eichel has been in the NHL since he was 18, but I really think they're, being a Sabres fan, I've watched a lot of maturation from Jack, but especially for a goaltender position. Back to oh shit, how do you say his name again? Askarov?
Which guy, sorry? Askarov. Yeah.
I just didn't want to screw it up. I didn't want to sound like an absolute idiot there. I probably sound worse now. But no worries. Askarov, I think it's one of those things. I know nobody you take in the top 10 besides maybe first or second pick is going to be there right away. But I think with a goalie, you're going to see that stretched a little bit longer. I think, whoever might take him, I've seen Nashville at 11 be projected to take him. I've seen him as high as 4 to the Detroit Red Wings, which I feel like is awfully high for a goaltender. I've never, we haven't seen a goalie taken that high in a long time here, but I just don't think that he's going to be ready right away. But I agree. I think he's going to be one of those guys that, they say, oh, look at this. They could just do it a first line, a defensive pairing, and a goaltender, and he would obviously be the best goaltender from this draft class. I 100% agree with that. He probably could be the next Carter Hart if I had to pick somebody that comes in just a couple seasons after they're drafted and really helps whatever franchise, like Nashville. If he comes in a year or two in Nashville when Rene's on his way out, and UC Saros is not the guy there. It all depends on where he goes. The Buffalo Sabres are talked to be in for a goalie, so maybe he goes as high as 8. Maybe he goes higher. I don't know. I'm not a psychic. I guess we'll find out at the draft itself. But I'd agree with that. If I had to pick, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say. I think look out for this as a sleeper. I could see Ottawa trading down pick number 5 to say something like 8, and then taking Askarov with that pick. Because when I look at teams that need goalies, Ottawa needs a goalie. The Devils, they have Blackwood, but they could potentially, if Blackwood doesn't pan out, Askarov could be the solution. Like you mentioned, Buffalo could use Askarov. I think the Minnesota Wild could use Askarov. The Nashville Predators could use Askarov if Saros isn't the answer in net. And the Florida Panthers, because clearly Bobrovsky has not been the answer, could use Askarov. Even as low as 13, if he drops that far. The Carolina Hurricanes could use Askarov. There's tons of teams that could use an elite goaltender to give them that next little push over in a couple of years and help them go deeper into the playoffs.
I'd agree with that. You know what? We'll touch back on that later. You mentioned Ottawa trading with Buffalo at 8. I can definitely see that. I want to give it the time it needs, but for this segment, I want to talk about my pick for the outside of the top 3, and I would say Marco Rossi. I mean, that's not a necessarily bold pick because I've seen him go as high as 4 in mock drafts. I feel like mock drafts are the most off when it comes to the NHL. Because you just have no clue with this. Players can get, overlooked. And that's why every year you've got guys at like 16 and 24 and 37 that all of a sudden those are the top 3 guys from the draft class or something like that, or up in the top 5 of the draft class, right? And they're in all the redrafts. But I see him getting the Cole Caulfield treatment because he's small. He's a small dude who's, a good skater, but it's not elite. He's probably NHL average at skating. He's not putting anybody on their heels when he's coming down the wing. But I think the dude's playmaking ability, I mean, he put up points, man. Like, he went absolutely berserk this season. Putting up 120 points in 56 games played in the OHL for, a stacked Ottawa 67s roster, 100%, not going to lie. But he can do it, man. It doesn't, you could be bad and still put up points, but to put up this level of points, the most points in the OHL from a non-North American born player, is ridiculous. I mean, I just think that I could see a scenario where, he's only 5'9", and his physical talent is pretty much 85% to 100% of where it could be. Teams are going to get worried about that, but I think his size is fine. I mean, Tyler Johnson's another small guy that I think gets overlooked. That's a really good hockey player and can contribute. He talks about him potentially being traded. Big name that I think people have forgotten about because he's been shifted into a checking line role, less of a scoring line role. But I just see him getting passed over because of his size, not because of his talent. And I think teams are really going to pay for passing up on talent because he's smaller. Now, I know I just used the excuse earlier that I think Quinton Byfield has the talent, but not the size. But I think teams tend to value that size. And I think that's why I see him being number 2. I also just think he's that talented, Quinton Byfield. But I also think Rossi's very talented. It's going to get looked over for the 5'9", 183 frame of his.
Yeah, Marco Rossi, definitely a point producer. Like Ryan mentioned, 120 points. But he in the OHL this year, 39 goals as well. That's more than Lafreniere or Byfield or Cole Perfetti, who is in many drafts at number 4 or number 5 in many rankings. I believe he is number 5 on Bob McKenzie's rankings and number 4 on NBC's rankings. Marco Rossi, I think, has the potential to be a very good top 6 forward. He's a pure center, which again brings more value as a center. As Ryan mentioned, also very undersized, but I think Marco Rossi's compete level is good, and I think he'll be a good addition and a good locker room guy for any NHL team.
100%. It's one of those things that, again, it's not the talent that's a question. I think he's going to just, maybe even falling to 9 may be far for him. Falling to the bottom of that top 10 would be far. And I think it's going to make those teams 4 through whatever that pass on him really upset that they did. It's one of those Caulfield situations. Well, I know Caulfield hasn't done anything in the NHL yet, but still, it's one of those looking back on it. Maybe we should have not passed up on the size, and maybe one of those GMs that did pass on Cole Caulfield will take the chance with Marco Rossi. You had mentioned a sleeper pick, Abby.
So my sleeper pick outside of the top kind of pack of players, I think, is Lukas Reichel. Definitely a name that's been thrown around a little bit. Reichel played in Eisbaden Berlin of the Dell League, both this year briefly. I don't think he's played any games yet, but last year as well. And he scored 24 points in 42 games playing against men. Again, the same thing I liked about Stützle, playing against men. So he's going to be more likely, in my opinion, to be NHL ready, used to the physicality, and used to the drain of energy of playing against men. I think Reichel is ranked all over the place. I believe Elite Prospects has him at 43. Craig Button has him at 33. NHL Central Scouting has him 11th among European skaters. So he's all over the place in terms of rankings, but I think I could see him go as early as maybe number 16 in the draft, or mid to late first rounds, which would be above his projection. But I would love to see one of the Vancouver Canucks grab him if we could somehow sneak up into that late first round, or grab a second rounder, which is a rumor the Canucks are looking to add a second rounder in some way. And I would love to see them draft Lukas Reichel. Other people that could potentially use him, the Montreal Canadiens would probably love Reichel, even though I think they have more of a need for a center. Reichel is a winger, but he could be a nice addition. You could also look at the Devils, who already have Hischier and Jack Hughes down the middle. Picking up a winger would be nice for them as well. You could look at the Blue Jackets. You've already got Dubois. You've already got Wenberg down the middle. Another winger would help with them, although they already have a very good defensive core as well, and goalie. So I think a winger is exactly where they go. So if they could grab Reichel with pick number 21, that'd be a good landing spot for them as well.
Yes, nice. I'm looking at that. You seem to love the DEL. You guys, I think you lied to me earlier when I asked you if you watched the DEL, and you said no. I actually think you just watch it every game, like literally every game, every rewind, every highlight. I think you're just studying up on these German players, and you're going to assemble the next great German NHL team. So that would be really cool to see a German NHL line, because there's a lot of guys from the DEL in this draft. I'm looking at some of the rankings here and there, and I see a lot of that German flag here and there. But if I had to pick a guy, it's not necessarily a guy that I think scouts and prospect rankers are sleeping on. I just think he's going to be a guy that people don't look at and recognize the talent and give him the credit he deserves. So if I had to pick somebody, it would probably be an Anton Lundell. I think it's going to be quick for teams if you take him in the top 10, even in the top 8. I say 8 because he's another guy that Buffalo potentially is looking at. If you take him there, you're going to be like, oh, this guy is not putting up 80 points. Look at these guys behind him putting up 30 goals. Look at Jack Quinn just absolutely killing it. Right. Another guy later down the list that I'm kind of high on. I think he could be pretty good. That's another sleeper pick for you there subtly. But I think Anton Lundell is just going to get overlooked and he's going to get talked down unless he goes to the right franchise. If he goes to a franchise that's not winning and he comes up and he doesn't instantly help them win, I think it's going to be one of those situations where people look at him and is like, well, we wasted that pick. We should have taken X insert player here, right? Insert player that's having one good month, right? I think he's got that potential to be the perfect two-way center. If you need a second center or even a first center, he's your guy. I would honestly say he's going to have a similar career to a guy like Ryan O'Reilly. If I had to peg an NHL comparison, maybe not as exactly talent-wise, he's the same as O'Reilly, but just that career where put up 60 to 70 points, which is good, right? But nobody ever talks about you as one of the top centers, yet you're a Conn Smythe winning player. So
Selke, I think, is what you were looking for, maybe?
He won the Conn Smythe, right? When the Blues won the Cup?
I think so.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He's the guy that you won't talk about, but when it comes to push comes to shove, he's that guy that is just really going to set your team apart to that next level. That two-way presence, being able to put 60 to 70 points up and be one of the best defenders in the NHL. Ryan O'Reilly, Bergeron gets talked about all the time. He's that kind of guy. Bergeron's probably one of the best defensive forwards we've seen in decades. But, Ryan O'Reilly doesn't get that talk. He was in Buffalo. He was in Colorado. He's now in St. Louis. Nowhere he's gone has he really gotten talked about until he lifted the Conn Smythe. And that's kind of what I mean. And that's what I think Anton Lundell. But another name, I threw that in there quickly, but Jack Quinn from the Ottawa 67s. Like I said, it's a stacked roster. And of course, a stacked roster is going to have multiple guys that can produce at an NHL level. And I think Jack Quinn can do just that.
To speak to Lundell as well, he had 28 points in 44 games in Liga this year with HIFK. Don't know if that's an acronym or not. Also 19 points in 38 games last year. Appears to be a little bit more of a playmaker than a goal scorer. And as Ryan mentioned, the thing he's most known for is his two-way game. Anton Lundell, I think, can be a very solid, steady number one or number two center, depending on how he develops. Also, very fun to watch. I've only watched a couple of his highlights and stuff. Nothing too flashy, but a very impressive guy who knows how to get stuff done.
I'd agree. Something popped into my mind. You said flashy, and I was thinking flashy fins, and all of a sudden Line popped into mind. He's definitely got a better defensive presence than the last highly rated Finnish player, although Miro Heiskanen is probably up there as well. Anyway, here's a topic that you've been talking about all night, and it's trades, Abby. You've been mentioning trades. I've been thinking about a couple. I wasn't thinking about draft pick trades, but go ahead, entertain me with that Senators moving back to 8 trade.
So I didn't specifically say the Senators moving back to 8, but I think 5 is a little bit too high to be taking Askarov. So you have to figure out, and I know this can be very difficult, but you have to figure out who is interested in Askarov. It's very much something the Canucks went through when they were drafting Pettersson. They were seeing if they could move back, but they couldn't risk moving too far back because rumor has it the Rangers wanted to take Pettersson, hence taking a different Swedish forward in Elias Andersson. So what the Senators are going to have to do is they're still going to want to have Askarov. So they're going to want to see how far can they go back. Are people interested in Jake Sanderson? Are people interested in Jamie Drysdale? Are people interested in Raymond, Cole Perfetti, Marco Rossi, Jack Quinn, Lundell? You look below that. I think that's about as low as I could see Askarov going. Because I doubt, as great as Caden Gooley and Dawson Mercer, Hendrix Lapierre, those guys are. Seth Jarvis, another one. Those guys are. I don't know how many of those guys you would be able to take above Askarov just because of the value someone like Askarov could provide. So Ottawa's at 5. I could see them trading. It depends. There's a risk, of course, that New Jersey takes it because right now. I think it depends on their confidence in Blackwood. Blackwood is 23 years old, and he's only had, I would say, like one good solid year in the NHL. So it's up to the GM. Does he think that Mackenzie Blackwood is the future and he's going to be, a starting goaltender, in which case maybe the pick on Askarov could potentially be wasted, and then instead you can go for a Rossi or someone who's there that late? Or do they not think that Blackwood is the future, in which case they'd go for Askarov? And if you're Ottawa, you have to figure that out, because if you want Askarov and New Jersey wants Askarov, then the lowest you can trade down is 6, at which point you're getting minimal assets for all the hassle of trading down anyways.
See, I like the idea of maybe the Senators trade down, recoup some value, some more picks, get some more prospects, kind of just stockpile that arsenal, right? I don't know if it's going to be for Askarov, though. I wouldn't be surprised to see them trade down and even take a Jake Sanderson, a good defender. I mean, you've got Shabbat, right? They still have Brandstrom, too, correct? I'm pretty sure they still have him in the system. So they've got guys in the system, but a Jamie Drysdale, a Jake Sanderson, those guys, maybe if they look like they're going to slip and you don't have to get them at 5, maybe you can get some other assets to a desperate team such as the Sabres that need to get high quality players now for risk of losing Jack Eichel. Maybe that's a team that has to push the panic button and trade up. Or you can just, get their second or they get their first overall pick if you throw them a player. I don't know what player they would do, but things like that. I wouldn't be surprised to see some of those defenders start to slide up that board, because we're looking at these prospect rankings and the defenders in the top 15 are looking pretty thin. I mean, I know goalies never are talked about this high, but I mean, to have this few defenders in this top area, I mean, feels a little light, especially in the recent years of Cal McCarr, Quinn Hughes, Miro Heiskanen, Rasmus Dahlin. Those guys are all top picks. I'm sure I'm forgetting some too, but those have been the ones that have been talked about quite a bit. And those are like top of the draft guys. So if I was to see a trade, I think it would be maybe somebody needs a defenseman, but I don't know how much shuffling of picks we're going to see. But I could potentially see guys like Tyler Johnson, or Matt Murray, or those guys get moved. Oliver Ekman Larson to Vancouver or Boston. Some of that might happen because we don't have a ton of time between now and free agency. I'll tell you what, usually it's like July 22nd or June 22nd for the draft, and then free agency starts on the July 1st. That's usually like a solid week to 9 days. We've got three days by the time the draft to free agency. Maybe we see a Taylor Hall for a 4th. Maybe some team doesn't like what they're seeing and they're like, give me the negotiating rights to Taylor Hall because I don't like anybody on the board right now. I'm not going to take a dart throw. Let me see if I can negotiate with Taylor Hall. I don't know if that's going to happen. That's the one I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think we're going to see a Taylor Hall trade, but I do think we could potentially see one of those trades. It could be a big shakeup from Buffalo too. You don't know. Buffalo's done it in the past when they acquired Ryan O'Reilly and Robin Lehner on draft night at the same night they drafted Jack Eichel. I don't think we're going to see something that crazy, but we might see some players move here and there.
Yeah, to speak to the Fleury trade, in order to re-sign some of their own players and potentially go after people in free agency, I think that a Fleury trade on draft day is almost inevitable. Vegas is under a massive crap crunch right now, and they've got people to re-sign. And Fleury is at a $7 million cap hit. For as great as Fleury is, they have Robin Lehner signed at $5 million, which in my opinion is a steal of a contract, with a decent term as well. So I think Marc-Andre Fleury has to go during the draft at some point. Where he will go, I don't know. There's plenty of destinations that need a goaltender. Like I mentioned, very similar locations to where I saw Askarov, except you have to factor in Fleury would be coming in and definitely would be going to either a fringe team or a contending team. There's no point in Fleury going to a rebuilding team because by the time the team can start competing, he's likely no longer the caliber of goalie that he was traded for. Another person who I want to address as a Canucks fan is Oliver Ekman Larson. So I don't see this trade happening on draft day because Oliver Ekman Larson has submitted a two-team trade list. So I guess, or you could say a 29-team no-trade list. His teams are Boston and Vancouver, which is a pleasant surprise. This is very similar, reminiscent to the Ryan Kessler trade, where Ryan Kessler gave the Canucks an ultimatum: trade me to Anaheim, and Anaheim was able to absolutely just fleece the Canucks in that deal, even though Ryan Kessler in his later years ended up becoming a bit of a cap anchor. For many, many years, Ryan Kessler was an absolutely spectacular two-way forward with an excellent defensive game, great at faceoffs, and could score as well. Great pass in front of the net. We look at Oliver Ekman Larson. The question is, what is he right now? Is he that top 2 defenseman that he's been seen as in the past? Is he a top 4 defenseman? And how long will he be staying in his prime? And the number one reason I should say I don't see this happening during draft day is the Canucks and the Bruins are lacking the capital to land Oliver Ekman Larson. I believe the previous asking price has been a roster player, a prospect, a good prospect. So I believe from Edmonton they were asking for Evan Bouchard or something like that, and a first-round pick. So that's a hefty asking price, and I don't believe either team has a first-round pick, if I'm not wrong.
Boston,
sorry,
I think. Yeah, no, you're right. The Vancouver Canucks do not, and the Boston Bruins do not have first-round picks.
Yeah, so I don't see proper capital that they could shift on draft day for Oliver Ekman Larson. If that deal were to happen, I think it would be sometime in July. To address another trade, the trading of Hall's rights. I think this is highly likely because I do not think Taylor Hall is re-signing in Arizona. And getting even a conditional 4th-round pick is a better asset than nothing. Taylor Hall is a player who has had very off and on seasons. So throughout his first couple seasons, I think his first 5 or 6, he was scoring between 30 and 45-ish points before having... Oh, sorry, pardon me. I was looking at the flip of penalty minutes. Excuse me.
I was going to say
his
that
first
sounds
3
pretty
seasons,
low.
he was scoring between 40 and 55 points before having a breakout 80-point season. And then kind of middling a little bit until went off to New Jersey and then had a good season with 53 points, and then his MVP season with 93 points, almost 40 goals. But since then, he's been struggling a little bit. 2018-19, only playing 33 games with 37 points, which is excellent, but something I think myself and Ryan have been discussing is that the best ability is availability.
Mm-hmm.
Last year as well, we have 65 games thanks to COVID, and he's put up 52 points, which is not bad at all by any stretch of the imagination, but it depends where he's willing to go and how much money he's willing to take. So many teams with the cap not rising like they were expecting are now in cap crunches. So that leaves the number of teams who can pursue Taylor Hall down, or it creates more roadblocks where people have to trade away cap and potentially give away more assets to even have the possibility of signing Taylor Hall in the first place.
And I think to that point, people seem to hang on to that Hall Hart Trophy winning season. That season he just went I mean, what? He didn't even go ballistic. He had what, 90-some points? Did you say?
93.
Yeah, 93.
Yep.
That's not even ballistic by today's
goals.
standards. So he had a great season. But I think people need to realize that Taylor Hall is somebody that's going to give you 70s to low 80s in points. He's not one of those guys that you just build your roster around. He's a great winger. He's a great additional piece. But I just don't think he's that super high-end, ridiculous, like, I need to get this guy now kind of player. And I think that might be part of the downfall as far as his contract or whatever team gets him, because they may still be paying what he's asking. If we go ahead and use Evolving Hockey here and use their predicted cap hit and term, they have Taylor Hall projected making 7 years, $8.5 million, but I have a feeling he's going to make more than that. And I think that's going to be a serious overpayment. I think 7 years, $8.5 is a good contract for Taylor Hall. I think that's fine. I mean, Jeff Skinner's making $9 million, so that's a great contract, I think. Although it's a little different if Skinner's can score 40 goals, if Taylor Hall can put in 82 points. I think, Taylor Hall's still the better value. Anyway, point being, I think that he's going to get north of $8.5 million, and I think that's a little. $8.5 million would make me happy. Anything higher, I get real uncomfortable with Taylor Hall.
Yeah, I could definitely see teams breaking open, even in spite of. I could see certain teams with the cap space looking at about $10 million potentially for Taylor Hall, which I think is too much. Again, very reminiscent of the Jeff Skinner contract, but I think Taylor Hall. No offense to Jeff Skinner, but I think Taylor Hall's a little bit better than Jeff Skinner, and even on an off year.
Well, and counterpoint,
he's guaranteed to net you.
Counterpoint to that, Jeff Skinner was coming off a career 40 goal scoring season. on a team that's desperate for goal scoring. Taylor Hall's coming off multiple seasons where he's been good, but not elite. So I don't know if 70 points, 75 points is a $9-10 million player. I just, in the NHL, the contract landscape is always changing, but I don't know what you pay Taylor Hall, but I don't think it's more than 9. Maybe GMs think otherwise. Maybe he'll prove me wrong, but I hope for whatever GM sake he does. You mentioned earlier too, Marc-Andre Fleury trade. I wouldn't be surprised. You mentioned the New Jersey Devils are in need of a goaltender because you were talking about that as a way to say the Ottawa Senators might not trade back to 8. I think it makes perfect sense for the Devils to go after Marc-Andre Fleury. They're one of those teams that has a lot of holes. They've got, a good amount of cap space with not a ton of big contracts needing to be signed. Now they do need to fill out their roster a bit more than they've got it. So maybe it's less likely with his $7.5 million. But if you even make Vegas eat $1.5 million or even $1 million, 6.5, anywhere in the sixes feels a lot better for Marc-Andre Fleury than his current $7.5 million cap hit. So I don't know if the Devils would do it. They have 3 first-round picks. I don't think they're getting a first for Marc-Andre Fleury, but they certainly have assets and capital that they could throw here and there for Vegas to get him off the books. Because Vegas is the team with zero leverage. Nobody has to take Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah, I totally agree. Agree with your thinking, I should say. I'm not sure I agree with Vegas to New Jersey because I don't think they currently, like you said, they still have to fill out their roster. They don't have a roster, I think, that can compete to even for a playoff spot, let alone to go deep into the playoffs yet. Maybe in a couple of years once Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier and their other prospects have developed. But I don't think the addition of Marc-Andre Fleury makes them a playoff team. And while I think he'd be a great mentor for Mackenzie Blackwood and a potential Askarov if he's drafted, I think it also kind of creates a logjam to the point where if Mackenzie Blackwood is ready for starting minutes, now you have Fleury kind of in his way, and now you have the awkward position of making Fleury the backup again, which is, again, like I said, awkward.
Right.
But I think it's an intriguing proposition for sure.
I hear your opposition to it, and I raise you one Detroit Red Wings, a team just looking to take on assets for cap space. They're using their cap space as a weapon to get assets. And I think a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury, is a guy that is going to get buzz around your team, maybe get a few butts back in the seats when we can get there. They're not a team that has too many big names to re-sign. Bertuzzi, Mantha, Timashov. I mean, these guys are good, but they're not going to command elite contracts. $26 million in projected cap space. I just think it's another potential option. We'll see where he goes, if he even goes anywhere. But I wouldn't be surprised if, like you said, Marc-Andre Fleury is a name that moves on draft night. All right, and with trades all wrapped up, let's go ahead and do a quick segment here, Abby. We are the Expansion Bros for a reason. Sabres and Canucks are Expansion Bros, both entering the league in 1970. So we will always have a segment on every podcast episode of Canucks and Sabres talk. So, Abby, I'll ask you first. What do you want to see Vancouver do tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night is not going to be a big night for the Vancouver Canucks. They're missing their first round pick and potentially their second round pick. Or I don't know if they're missing their second round pick this year or it's next year. But I know Vancouver is looking to acquire another second round pick, and I'm hoping that, like I mentioned earlier, they go after Lucas Reichel.
Yeah, you are missing a first and a second this year.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hoping for is more after that. I'm hoping that we can re-sign Jacob Markstrom without expansion draft protections. And I'm hoping if we cannot, then we will re-sign Christopher Tanev and Tyler Toffoli and potentially look for someone like, I don't know if he's a free agent or not, but someone like a Hudobin or someone like a Lundqvist to, mentor Demko for a year and potentially shelter him if Demko's not 100% ready for the starting job next year.
You know what? I would 100% agree with that. I honestly, when you mentioned not re-signing Markstrom and re-signing Tanev and Toffoli, I loved that idea so much better. I know Markstrom is a Vezina Trophy candidate with the way he played. I don't know if that is Markstrom or if that was just a really good year for Markstrom. And besides, we saw what Demko did in those 3 playoff games. he played. He was absolutely elite, and he pretty much eliminated the Vegas Golden Knights single-handedly, even carrying into the next round, right? Like, he eliminated them because they were just in their own head because they couldn't score on him. They had no clue what the hell to do. So I think he's probably ready for an NHL role. I think he's ready to be the starter, but that's why you would bring in somebody like an Anton Khudobin. Maybe you give him $3 million. Demko's signed to his $1 million contract. That's all of a sudden $4 million instead of the $7 million you'd probably give Markstrom. You can re-sign those guys. You become a more well-rounded roster. And I think this Vancouver Canucks team is a team on the rise. One of the ones I'm very excited to be watching. I think legitimately it could be a very exciting year for Vancouver next season.
100%. I'm definitely looking forward to it, but I know the personnel decisions we make right now will have a large impact on whether they will be that same team that progresses to the next step next year and maybe can make it to the third round, or whether we see falling down. I don't know what the word is. I guess a drop in potential, just a borderline playoff team, or potentially, forbid, not even make it to the playoffs if we can't re-sign the right people, or if the team chemistry, anything happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of acquiring people, Oliver Ekman Larson, as I mentioned, has a 2-team trade list, Vancouver and Boston. I don't see how either team has the assets. Potentially Boston, maybe if you throw in like a Jake DeBrusk, but from Vancouver's side, we're already missing a first-round pick from this year. Potentially throwing in next year's first-round pick is a scary proposition to me. Additionally, Oliver Ekman Larson, I believe, is making $8.25 or $9 million, something like that.
$8.25 million is his cap hit.
$8.25 million. The Canucks are already very cash strapped. The only way I would be happy for that deal is if we were to send a Tyler Myers the other way. And at that point, I don't even know if Tyler Myers has any value or has negative value at this point.
He's also got a modified no-trade clause.
And a modified no-trade clause, so he might not even want to go there.
I still think Tyler Myers is a decent NHL defenseman. I don't think, you'd probably have to throw something in there, as you mentioned, a roster player with some salary.
Oh, of course.
Because you guys just can't do it. I'm looking at your situation right now. Maybe getting rid of a Jay Beagle for his $3 million cap hit, because he's not negative value, as you said Myers might be. So, again, this all just points to let Markstrom walk. You've got way more flexibility if you let him walk. The goaltending market is so bloated this year. The names in this goaltending market are ridiculous. You guys could even sign a Keith Kincaid or Aaron Dell to be a backup. I know they're not high quality backups, but there's names out there that you guys could go after to be your backup. I'm not necessarily saying go after Keith Kincaid, right? I think you're sleeping on Aaron Dell a little hard. Mike Smith too at 38, maybe one last hurrah. Condon is another guy that's out there.
No, thank you.
Well, listen, I'm just saying, you guys are going to have to, if you want to acquire Oliver Ekman Larson too, you're going to have to skimp out somewhere. And I feel like the perfect place is backup goalie, because I think Demko's ready to step in and play 55 plus games this year.
I'd still love to go with like a Henrik Lundqvist, someone to mentor him. I know Jacob Markstrom, I think, did a great job of like talking to Demko, mentoring him, because Markstrom's just a great guy, very nice guy. I've met him a couple times, and he's always very, very friendly with me. And even when you look and you ask his teammates, Markstrom's just a great locker room guy. So having someone not to necessarily replace him, but bring either veteran leadership or a good locker room presence, as well as steady goaltending. Because I believe Demko is ready for starting minutes, and you've mentioned you believe Demko is ready for starting minutes. But I would still like to have that safety net to where if Demko isn't ready, we're not stunting his development by just shoving too much onto him.
That's fair. I can totally understand not mortgaging the future. I just think from what we've seen so far in his NHL regular season play and playoff play, I think he's ready for it. I think he may not be that perfect Markstrom replacement, and he may technically be worse, but I think he's ready, and I think it would be a smart move for Vancouver to save and spend the cap elsewhere. Now, if we're going to talk about my Buffalo Sabres, we have a big day ish. I guess not. We have the 8th overall pick, and that's it. It's not like we have a glut of picks. But honestly, I don't want to see us move. I want to see us stay at 8. We don't have a ton of assets unless it's taking us like a fourth to move up to 5, which is not going to happen. So I think we're staying put. I don't think we have a ton of assets to move up, and I don't think there's anybody I'd want to move up for. We have a ton of options. It's a deep draft class. Like I said, I like Rossi. If he goes, maybe Raymond's there. If he goes, Perfetti could be there. If he goes, Holtz is there. If he's gone, Lundell is there. If he's gone, I don't know who we take, whatever. But point being, I just listed a bunch of guys that I think are going to be there. Lafreniere, Stützle, Byfield are the top 3. We know that. Who goes 4? Maybe it's Cole Perfetti to the Red Wings. Jamie Drysdale maybe sneaks up there above Buffalo somewhere. The Devils take a Jamie Drysdale or something like that. I think there are forwards available. The guy I want us to get is probably Marco Rossi. I don't think his skating or physicality is something that the Sabres are going to miss per se. I think what we need right now is just goal scorers. We have enough guys that have defensive roles. I mean, we got Curtis Lazar and guys like that, the Gergensons, if he comes back, the Oposos, those guys. We need people to put pucks in the back of the net. That is the Sabres' biggest issue. We need guys with a decent two-way game. Forwards, two-way forwards are also what we need. That's why I like Lundell and Rossi. Those are 2 guys I like. Holtz is fine, but I don't know how many more goal scorers and shooters we need. Jack is a very big shooter. It's one of his strong assets. I know he can also be a playmaker if needed to be, but I know one of his huge assets is his shot. And if he's got the puck on his stick, he's a threat. He can set up more plays. And then when they sit off him, he can shoot. Skinner's a big shooter. Olofsson's a shooter. I feel like in our top 6, we've got 3 shooters. We got Eric Stahl, who's going to be just a big body driving the net. He's also a guy that likes to shoot. Sam Reinhart's a decent two-way player. But I just really think that scoring, like pure goal scorers, is not exactly what I would say the Sabres need. I'd say less Holtz, more so guys like Raymond, Rossi, Lundell are guys I'd really like to see. Guys that could complement Dylan Cousins' game in the future, because Cousins could be our second line center. I don't want to see us take a defenseman because I think our top, we've got guys that can play. We don't need top line potential on our in this draft. I think we've got guys in the system. Borgen, I'm forgetting some of the names, but Jacob Bryson, I think, is another one that could potentially come up and play in the NHL and do a job. So I really just think it's those quality forwards that produce, that can kind of more than a one trick pony.
Yeah, I think Buffalo is a very interesting situation. Like you mentioned, I like Marco Rossi for you guys as well. He can compete with Dylan Cousins. But for that very same reason you mentioned that you have Dylan Cousins as your number 2 forward, I question whether taking a center, if Dylan Cousins really is what I think he is, and that's a guaranteed number 2, borderline number 1 center, if he pans out how he should. Maybe someone like an Alexander Holtz, who, as you mentioned, could potentially be a first-line left winger, which you guys don't have right now. You guys have Sam Reinhart, and you have Jack Eichel, so that's your center and right wing.
And Olofsson
Alexander Holtz
Skinner.
potentially. I think Olofsson is going to be a good player, but I don't know if he's going to be able to be the same left winger that Alexander Holtz can. I'm not to sleep on Olofsson, like you said. He's a potential 30 goal scorer. I see him more on like a good solid second line 25 goal scorer. On a good team, Victor Olofsson is your second line forward. On this year's Sabres, 100% he's your first line forward. But I think on a good team, he's your second line sniper.
I'll ask you, what then would we do with a Skinner? Does Skinner then go to the third line? Because that's the problem. I think the Sabres organization is incredibly weak on the right side. I mean, the second best right winger we have in the organization just got signed today for 3 years at 1.4 per year, and that's Tage Thompson. He's the second best right winger we have.
I should say Alexander Holtz can also play the right wing. He plays the left wing and the right wing.
That's true.
Again, something I like is the utility.
I see him as if he was to play for the Sabres, the right winger. But the reason I like Rossi is I think Rossi, to your Tim Stützle argument from way back at the beginning of this podcast, couldn't play wing as well. I think he's got the ability to play winger. If his size is an issue, don't stick him in the center. Stick him on the wing. I think he can use his playmaking ability there.
I should clarify, when I say Stützle can play wing, it's because he already has played wing.
That's fair.
he has played left wing. I'm not just like saying that. Like Cole Perfetti, for example, has played center and left wing, much like Stützle, whereas Rossi has only played center. Holtz has played both wings. You know, it's listed on TSN as well as other websites that they're multi-position players. Whereas someone like a Lundell is a pure center, or a Rossi is a pure center, or a Raymond is like a pure right winger.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Actually, speaking of that, if you guys have space on that second line, Lucas Raymond, if he were to drop, actually, I think could be a great goal scorer. And I know you said you don't need more goal scorers.
I would actually look at Raymond as more of a playmaker that can score than a scorer that can make plays. Does that make sense? I know that's kind of like just, oh, wow, what in-depth analysis there. But I feel like it's a big difference there. I think Holtz is a goal scorer that can make plays, whereas Raymond is a playmaker that can score.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
I don't see him falling to 8, but hell, if he does, go for it, right? I'll take it. Raymond, Rossi, and Lundell. I don't know how I feel about Jack Quinn at 8. I feel like he's more of that 10 to 15 would be a solid value there. But I don't see the Sabres making too many trades too early anyway, where we've got some guys to re-sign. Reinhart. We got to re-sign Olofsson. Cahoon. Maybe Johan Larson. Victor Olofsson needs a new contract.
Brandon Montour.
I feel like Montour is our biggest trade chip. Montour.
He has RFA locked, so and it's highly unlikely to get offer sheeted. So you guys do have the leverage.
Right. So what I think would happen, the Sabres could potentially move a guy like Brandon Montour to fill in that role on the right wing, unless we move Brandon Montour for futures and prospects, and then sign, if you guys don't sign him, a Tyler Toffoli. I think that'd be that perfect second line right winger. Maybe not, because we still have a lot of scorers and he's another scorer. That line is very shoot first, but hey, you never know. But I'm very excited to see what happens. I see us maybe making a trade on draft day, maybe one not too flashy, but after Kevin Adams is done at pick 8 there, I could see us potentially picking up the phone, calling some teams like, hey, what's going on? Because free agency starts on Friday, right? Friday the 9th.
Yeah, that's right.
We only have a couple days, so it's interesting to see what teams will do. This has been an exciting chat, Abby. I'm very excited to see the future. I'm looking forward to chat again about free agency later this week. But that has been it for the Expansion Bros podcast. I am Ryan. He's Abby. Enjoyed talking with you all. Hope you guys enjoyed our thoughts. And if you guys have your own thoughts, let us know down in the comment section. If you guys like the podcast, let us know by hitting that like button, hitting subscribe, because we will do more of these throughout the year. But thank you guys so much for watching and listening, and we will talk to you later in the week.
Bye.